Some phrases sound harmless when you first hear them, maybe even sweet. But sometimes, behind those words, there's something darker: manipulation, emotional immaturity, or a refusal to grow. And if a woman ignores these subtle signs, she risks ending up in relationships that drain her energy, cloud her judgment, and disconnect her from her own inner power. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, talked about something called the shadow, the hidden part of the psyche where we bury the traits we don't want to face in ourselves and in relationships. This is often where toxic patterns begin. That's why it's crucial to spot the warning signs early, because once these behaviors take root, they can cause real damage over time. In this video, we're going to break down 5 phrases you should never ignore when you hear them from a man. These phrases aren't just harmless comments. They're signals of deeper issues, things like manipulation, lack of accountability, or emotional control. And this isn't about avoiding minor disagreements or petty conflicts. It's about learning to see when someone is playing a psychological game, one that could cost you your emotional peace, your focus, and your connection to yourself. Seneca once said, "It's not that we have a short time to live, but that we waste much of it. And too often, we waste it on people who don't deserve that time." That's why it's so important to learn to recognize these red flags before they pull you into draining relationships that leave you depleted and disconnected from your own growth. So let's get into it. I'll not only help you spot these phrases, but I'll also give you the tools to respond calmly, powerfully, and without losing yourself in the process. 1. You have to accept me as I am. On the surface, this can sound like a statement of vulnerability or authenticity. And in healthy relationships, acceptance is important. But here's the problem. When a man says this to excuse bad behavior, it becomes a major red flag. Carl Jung taught us that self-knowledge is where wisdom begins. But he also warned that real growth starts when we stop making excuses and confront our own flaws. When someone says, "That's just who I am," and uses it to dodge accountability, you're not dealing with authenticity, you're dealing with someone who refuses to evolve. This phrase usually shows up after you've already noticed concerning behavior. Maybe it's emotional manipulation, passive aggressiveness, or a refusal to take responsibility for mistakes. And when you try to talk about it, suddenly you're the problem for not accepting him. But let's be clear, accepting someone doesn't mean tolerating harmful behavior. True authenticity isn't about staying the same no matter what. It's about having the courage to grow. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher, said it perfectly: "The perfection of character is to live each day as if it were your last, without laziness, without pretense." In other words, real growth requires effort. A conscious, self-aware woman should never carry the emotional load of someone who refuses to change. Being in that kind of relationship is like rowing a boat by yourself, while the other person refuses to even pick up an oar. If you accept this phrase at face value, you're setting yourself up for a future filled with excuses, broken promises, and emotional exhaustion. You'll find yourself constantly adjusting, constantly compromising, while he stays exactly the same. Remember, your environment shapes your growth, and if you're with someone who won't grow with you, they're only holding you back. So next time you hear, "You have to accept me as I am," ask yourself, is he willing to look inward? Or is this just an excuse to stay stuck? Because if he's constantly resisting growth, denying responsibility, and getting defensive when you point it out, that pattern won't get better. It will get worse. Protecting your peace isn't selfish, it's self-care. You're not here to rescue anyone or drag someone toward growth who refuses to move. You're here to share your life with someone who's also on the path of becoming better, who faces their flaws and works through them, just like you do every day. 2. All my exes were crazy or toxic. This one might sound like harmless venting at first. Maybe he's just sharing his past. But don't let that fool you. When a man constantly blames all his exes for everything that went wrong, it's usually a sign of emotional immaturity and projection. The Stoics taught that personal growth begins with honest self-examination. As Epictetus said, "It's not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." If a man's version of his past is always about how he was the victim and never about how he contributed to the problem, that's a red flag. Carl Jung explained that what we don't make conscious ends up controlling us from the shadows. And often, when a man talks badly about every woman he's ever dated, he's actually avoiding his own reflection. He's projecting his unresolved flaws onto his past partners. This mindset creates a victim narrative one, where he refuses to take responsibility and expects you to be the magical exception, the woman who finally understands him. But here's the truth. If he's never reflected on his part in past conflicts, why would he suddenly start now? Ask yourself, is it really possible that all his exes were the problem? Or is there a pattern here that he refuses to see? As Jung warned, what we deny submits us. Being with someone who refuses emotional accountability is like building a house on sand. No matter how hard you work to create a stable relationship, it will always collapse under the same old patterns. And here's the kicker: if he talks about his exes this way now, sooner or later he'll talk about you the same way. People stuck in the victim mindset always need someone new to blame. Being in this kind of relationship is like trying to row a boat that has a hole in it. No matter how much love, effort, or patience you pour in, it will always be sinking. That's why emotional discipline is essential. Look beyond the words. Ask yourself, has he ever reflected on his own mistakes? Or is his story always about what others did to him? You're not here to be anyone's therapist or emotional life raft. You're here to walk beside someone who's also doing their work, not someone who expects you to carry them while they stay stuck. 3. If you really loved me, you'd do what I ask. This one is subtle and incredibly dangerous. It's emotional blackmail disguised as love. At first, it might sound like a simple request. But look closer, it's not about love, it's about control. It's using guilt to override your boundaries. The Stoics remind us that true love can't be forced. It has to be chosen freely. Epictetus said it best, no one can enslave you emotionally unless you allow it. Carl Jung also spoke about this dynamic. He warned that unhealthy relationships often start when one person projects their insecurity or need for control under the mask of love. And this phrase is a textbook example. When a man says, "If you loved me, you do what I ask," what he's really saying is, "Only if you meet my demands are you worthy of my love." That's not love, that's manipulation. At first, giving in might feel like an act of love. But over time, you start losing yourself, your authenticity, your boundaries, your sense of power. They all start to fade. And the more you give in, the more the demands grow. What starts as a test of love becomes a routine of emotional submission. You'll eventually find yourself unsure whether you're acting out of love or just trying to avoid punishment. If you find yourself in a situation like this, pause, breathe. Remember, love isn't about pleasing someone at the cost of yourself. When a man uses guilt to get his way, he's not questioning your love, he's attacking your character. Healthy love respects your voice, your decisions, and your right to say no. As Jung taught, and the Stoics confirmed, real love is rooted in freedom, not control. You don't owe anyone endless explanations for setting healthy boundaries. And you definitely don't need to surrender your peace just to avoid conflict. If you allow emotional blackmail once, it will happen again and the demands will only get bigger. So stand your ground. Respond with clarity, calmness, and integrity. Because someone who truly loves you doesn't need to manipulate you. They listen. They respect you even when you disagree. 4. You're not enough for me. This is one of the most cutting, manipulative things someone can say. It's not just a passing comment, it's an attack on your identity and your worth. And when it comes from someone who claims to love you, it can leave deep emotional scars. But let's be clear, this phrase is rarely about you. Carl Jung explained that when people feel empty inside, they often project that dissatisfaction onto others. So when a man tells you, "You're not enough for me," he's really talking about his own emptiness, his own impossible expectations, and his need for control, not your actual value. What's happening here is a classic manipulation tactic. By making you feel like you're not enough, he's trying to make you work harder for his approval. It's not about love, it's about power. He wants you to doubt yourself, to shrink, to keep chasing validation that he'll never fully give. And in this game, you'll always lose, because the target keeps moving. Today, you're not enough for one reason. Tomorrow, it'll be something else. And before you know it, you're exhausted questioning things you once knew with certainty, constantly wondering what you need to fix in yourself just to be worthy of love. But here's the truth. A conscious, self-aware woman never begs for love. She doesn't try to squeeze herself into someone else's ever-changing expectations. She knows her worth. She shares her life with someone who values her for who she is, not someone who pokes at her insecurities to gain control. So if you ever hear, "You're not enough for me," stop, take a breath, and remind yourself, this insecurity isn't yours, it's his. As Jung said, you cannot make someone see your light if they are only searching for their shadows. And from a Stoic perspective, Marcus Aurelius put it simply, do not let another man's soul rule over yours. That includes their opinions of you, especially when those opinions are used as weapons. A man who tries to make you feel inadequate isn't being honest, he's manipulating you. He's projecting his own fears, his own emptiness, and his own need to feel superior. And if you don't catch this pattern early, you could end up in a relationship where you're constantly trying to prove yourself while slowly losing your sense of self. Stoic wisdom teaches us, no external opinion has power over you unless you give it permission. Your worth doesn't fluctuate based on someone else's mood or judgment. It's anchored in your own values, your own integrity, and your own inner clarity. So if a man insists on making you feel like you're not enough, don't try to prove him wrong. Don't get caught in that trap. Walk away. Not out of pride but out of self-respect. Emotional discipline means protecting your confidence, your clarity, and your peace of mind. As Seneca said, the greatest power is self-mastery, and that mastery starts when you decide not to accept emotional crumbs dressed up as feedback. So when you hear this phrase, stand tall, know your value, the real problem isn't you, it's his need to feel powerful by making you feel small. And that brings us to the fifth phrase, the most subtle and, in some ways, the most dangerous of them all. 5. Do whatever you want. At first glance, this might seem like permission, like he's giving you the freedom to make your own choices. But pay attention to how he says it. The cold tone, the irony, the underlying resentment, that's the real message. He's not actually giving you freedom. He's setting an emotional trap. Carl Jung spoke about the ways people manipulate from the shadows using subtle tactics instead of direct communication. And this phrase, it's a classic example. When a man says, "Do whatever you want," with that passive-aggressive tone, what he's really saying is, I'm not going to tell you directly how I feel, but if you don't do what I secretly want, I'll make you feel guilty later. He's putting you in a lose-lose situation. If you go ahead and make the decision, you risk facing his silent treatment, sarcasm, or emotional withdrawal. If you back down, you're caving to manipulation. Either way, you're trapped. The Stoics warned against this kind of behavior. Seneca said, "Speak so that your words require no interpretation." Healthy relationships are built on clear, direct communication, not emotional riddles. When someone speaks to you in codes, it's not communication, it's control. They want you to guess, to please, to adjust, while they hide behind ambiguity. And over time, this erodes your peace of mind. You start living according to someone else's moods instead of your own needs. But here's the antidote: emotional intelligence and clarity. If a man says, "Do whatever you want," in that passive-aggressive way, take the words at face value. Literally do what you want. Make your decision. Take action. And do it without guilt. That single choice breaks the cycle. It forces the other person to either grow up, communicate directly, or sit alone in their emotional games while you move forward. Jung and the Stoics both taught that freedom begins the moment you stop reacting to manipulation and start acting from your center. You don't have to decode hidden meanings. You don't have to chase clues or read between the lines. You choose clarity, you choose honesty, and you choose your peace over someone else's emotional confusion. Remember, healthy love is transparent. It doesn't hide behind games. It doesn't provoke guilt. It respects your freedom and welcomes honest conversation. When your thoughts, words, and actions are aligned, you build inner peace. And that peace is far more valuable than staying in a relationship where you're constantly guessing, doubting, or apologizing for simply making your own choices. Final thoughts, so let's bring it all together. These 5 phrases might sound harmless at first, but each one carries a deeper, more dangerous message if you're not paying attention. And if you ignore them, you risk falling into relationships that drain your energy, steal your focus, and weaken your sense of self. Carl Jung's teachings and Stoic philosophy remind us to look beyond the surface to see the pattern, not just the moment. It's about recognizing when someone is projecting, manipulating, or refusing to grow. And it's about protecting your emotional stability with wisdom and strength. Because life is too short to waste on people who don't deserve your energy. You've worked too hard to build your peace, your discipline, and your sense of self to let someone dismantle it with subtle control tactics. So the next time you hear one of these phrases, pause. Don't just listen to the words, listen to the pattern. And most importantly, respond from your center, not from fear or guilt. Protect your energy. Stay true to your values. And never forget, you're not here to shrink for anyone, you're here to grow.